Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. In this video I will be performing a in-depth look at what a narcissistic analysis looks like. Because see, we often think of narcissists as people who control others in order to benefit themselves. But there is a spectrum as to any particular state of the existence of humans, which is the potential rate at which you're using the existence itself, which means in its spectrum are opposite polarities. Now you might see a narcissist that sees or seeks to gain control over an individual or individuals in their lives based on the fact that when analyzing the narcissist themselves, you would then realize that that particular individual has been hurt a lot in life. And in exchange for that pain, they achieved a perspective, a complex, where in order to control the experience of their pain, they began controlling the world around themselves to minimize their experience of pain, resulting in them no longer seeking to see their reflection because they fell in love with whom they were. But to what degree do we see the now duality behind that individual? It is one thing to use the aspect of this complex to spread or push others towards a direction away from something, which would be to not seek to control pain towards yourself, but to make others avoid pain towards themselves. That is, in essence, that is what would be considered a positive narcissist, also known as a psychologist. An individual that can make you aware of your patterns or the things you do not recognize because they themselves have been able to analyze their environment in order to gain their narcissistic gaze, which is the moment you enter a slight squint in your eyes, a focus point, a point of analysis, and you will experience this point of narcissistic gaze as in Gaze, as in a sight. The moment you begin to reflect upon something or analyze a particular process. And in the psychologist's analysis, you begin to realize that there is a spectrum to narcissism, just as there is a spectrum to empathy. You can take empathy from being, I want the good for others, or you can take the empath spectrum to neuroticism, which is, I don't want that for others because I didn't have that for myself, which is in itself jealousy. And in the dualities, we now begin to see the spectrums at which you can experience the two complexes. When you look now at the separate complexes, going back into the narcissist complex, because this is a primary subject of the video, in a narcissistic person's tendencies, you have to then analyze the true root behind their intentions, because a narcissist is a slightly pathic person. which means they have a complex, a perspective they have pulled back inside their mind in order to achieve a greater point of sight, a perspective. Which now, if you look at a telescope, the more I pull back from the telescope, the more I see a further distance, a greater perspective. In the aspect of a narcissist, they have pulled further back in their mind as a result of pain. And in their seeking of controlling that pain, they either seek to control others to benefit themselves, or they seek to control others to benefit others in order to benefit themselves. In its essence, you could say that from narcissist and empath is the opposite polarities in their own sense. Just as there are empathetic narcissists, are also narcissistic neuroticisms. And in that analysis, you begin to see 4 different personality types arise from 2. And now when we go further into the dive of this particular analysis, you would then realize that there is always a fighting force against the opposing, which is known as the partner. In the partner of the opposite, you would see the complete opposite of the previous 4. And from these previous 4, you then create replications of, once again, subdivisions, giving rise to more and more and more and more and more infinite amounts of personalities relating back to one particular archetype. This is where we see the fractal division of personality as a result of one source, which can also be said about the same replicative pattern regarding the experience of the universe, which is simply the universe observing itself, which is what life is. And in the observing of the universe, in order to become illuminated, you do not imagine figures of light. In order to become illuminated, you must first make the darkness conscious, which means you must first pull back within yourself and realize the self you are before you may achieve a sense of claiming to be illuminated, because even the illuminated themselves can tell you. Even Buddha stopped being seen as Buddha to the rest of his followers. You either die hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And that is the evolution of life, the aging process. And the more you age, the more this guilt process develops, the more you have to learn to control and hold the guilt and fear upon yourself, so that the world may not experience it in themselves. Thank you for joining me in my analysis.